Please welcome on stage for a talk with Axel Springer's CEO, Mathias Döpfner, the CEO of Microsoft, the awardee of this year's Axel Springer Award. Please welcome Mr. Satya Nadella.
So, dear Satya, first of all, congratulations to the award. The award is to encourage people to be courageous entrepreneurs, to be creative, and to contribute to the well-being of our society. You have delivered on all levels. Unfortunately, the prize is priceless, so you don't get any money that you can take. On the other hand, we thought we cannot let you go without anything, so it needs a little trophy, and that's why I would ask Zair Khan again on stage, please, to bring something.
Oh, all right. Thank you so much. There you go.
This is a little something which I got.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's like I just thought that I was going to come and sort of get an award in a conference room, and here it is. I'm listening to Bollywood music and my cricket heroes, and oh my God, this is crazy. It's great. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So you leave it here?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Satya, have you guys ever met before?
No, I've seen him on TV, let's say.
Okay. I have to admit that we Europeans, or at least most of us, have a hard time to really understand cricket. Even the rules are pretty complicated. But we also understand that it's a great time for cricket these days. Yesterday, the Olympic Committee has decided that after 120 years, cricket is going to come back as an Olympic discipline in 28. And I think in 36 you are at least applying to be the host of the next Olympic Games.
That's in India, that's right.
In India, right.
But yeah. I'm very looking forward to the US actually having a World Cup. I think they're co-hosting it with the West Indies, the 2020 World Cup. So I'm looking forward to that.
Right. And these days there is the World Cup in India of cricket, and India won against Pakistan a few days ago in front of 122,000 people. So it shows us it's a big thing in India. When you were young, you wanted to become a cricket player. Could you tell us why? What makes cricket so special? And seriously, is there anything that you learned from cricket for leadership?
Look, I mean, like sport, I thought Zahir did a fantastic job of, I think, talking about what sport means to us, where we grow up, the sports we play, and in particular, I think team sports have a huge bearing on who we become as citizens, as human beings, as leaders. And to me, absolutely. I mean, when I think about all the things that I learned in growing up in the Deccan Plateau and in all those cricket pitches, and I think about sort of how I think about any situation, there is a lot. In fact, I think the thing that I talked to you about, and here's one of the fascinating things. Once I became CEO, all my unbelievable cricketing skills came to light, which was nothing, right? Which is you had to become CEO to somebody to even recognize you as a good cricketer. So they asked me to even write an article for the most important magazine or the thing that comes out each year that highlights great cricketing feats called the Wisden. And so I finally got into Wisden by writing an article about my great cricketing skills, and a lot of other folks were very, very jealous. I mean, how the heck did you make it to Wisden? And, all you had to do is become a CEO. But talking about, in that article, I went back and wrote these lessons I learned, like the lesson about how to compete on the field, right? Give everything on the field, or the leadership lessons I learned from the various captains I played under. Or
what Zair said, we lead not with arrogance, but with humility.
Yeah, I mean, there is, that ability to be able to be in the moment, give everything, and yet come out of it. And the other thing is resilience, right? I mean, sport is probably the thing that teaches you the most of what recovery looks like. And so therefore, yes, whether it's leadership or even personal management of high stress, I think is what sport teaches you.
The Brits are saying from time to time, it's not cricket. They say that if something is unfair, is cricket a particularly fair sport?
It is. Look, there are many cricketing terms which I think will, that'll be an entire session. But, to me, there is a certain center, there's the spirit of cricket, which is not just by living by the rules, but going and sort of interpreting the rules for how it should be played. And I think that applies to business.
When you became CEO of Microsoft, the company had at least a pretty different image. It was a very kind of testosterone load culture. And I think when you were appointed, it was quite a surprise to many people. You were not the favorite. You were basically the anti-Steve Ballmer. And I think even some people said that is not going to work with Microsoft. Nevertheless, you have changed the culture in no time very radically. Could you share a little bit why you became CEO, how that worked, and what you changed, and how did you do that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how I became CEO, because quite honestly, growing up in Microsoft...
why did they choose you if you were such a contrarian candidate? What do you think?
A couple of things. One is growing up, none of us sort of thought like there'll be a day will come when Bill's not there and Steve is not there. I mean, they were a founder, and Steve was technically not a founder, but he had founder status. And until he decided to retire, quite frankly, it was not like as if I was sitting there saying that someday Steve will retire and I'll put up my hand for CEO. So, I'm a consummate insider, right? I've grown up there. All that is good, all that is bad about Microsoft's in me too. And so, if anything, I would say, Mathias, to me, I was grounded in the fact that I was the first, quote-unquote, non-founder CEO. But I had a very strong point of view on what we needed to do and where I wanted to take the company. And I always said, like, it's not about respecting... our industry has no respect for tradition. It has respect for innovation. I had the agenda for innovation, and that's probably at the end of the day what got the board to choose to go with me. But to your point about the culture, I wanted to get back. In some sense, when I think about what I've done, is get back to the Microsoft I joined, I loved, I grew up in. We were a very successful company in the 90s. In fact, we became the largest market cap company in the late 90s. I remember that day distinctly. And, you walk around the campus and people were walking around and thinking that we must be God's gifts to innovation. Except that was the day where we should have reminded ourselves that we can't be know-it-alls, but you needed to be learn-it-alls. I mean, this is something that we have really picked up as our cultural meme around growth mindset, or more importantly, confronting one's own fixed mindset. And that's been super helpful. If there's any success we've had of late, is because we're pushing ourselves to not sit on our laurels and think about what we did yesterday, but to acknowledge the mistakes we made and have the comfort, starting with me. And so that's, I think, really what makes institutions like us, companies like ours, succeed in the long run. But nothing is guaranteed.
You have not created Microsoft, but you have reinvented the company. And when you became CEO, the company was at a market cap of 400 billion. Today it's around 2.5 trillion, unimaginable almost. During this journey, would you say it was one big decision that you made that was the decisive factor? And if so, which was it?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that perhaps most has shaped us is in technology in particular. I mean, you could say today in any business, there's no franchise value. You have to reinvent. You've got to catch the next paradigm. And for me, having lived through essentially 4 very different technological and business model changes, the thing that I feel you need a long-term systematic frame of how you reinvent yourself. So first thing you need is capability. That it really, in fact, first you need new concepts. So like take AI. You need to be able to say, look, I am going to go chase something completely new that is a departure from everything you're doing today, both in terms of product and technology and business model. In order to do that, you need new capability, right? Even this generation of AI, for example, couldn't have been done with even yesterday's AI experts. Sometimes it's inside, sometimes you have to partner to get it, what have you. But you have to have capability to go after new concepts. And in order for you to have that capability, you have to have a culture that allows you to confront your fixed mindset. Because if you think about it, right, culture is what gets in the way of building new capability to go after new concepts long before it's conventional wisdom.
You're always referring to culture, and empathy is a very important element in the culture that you have created. Did the terrible experience of the loss of your son, we've seen that in the video, Zain, who was born with a fatal disease, and also bringing him up as a person with special needs, did that do anything with you, also with regard to your way to lead a company?
Yeah, I mean, the birth of Zain for both my wife and me was a very defining moment in our lives. And absolutely, it reshaped me and us as a family, and I would say, yeah, both as a human being, as a parent, as a partner, and as a leader at work. I mean, you know, the thing that, Mathias, I kind of distinctly remember is, you know, when Zain was born, he was quadriplegic, he had cerebral palsy, and I was in my, 20s at that time, late 20s, and mostly for the first, I would say, even multiple years, I was more in grief about what happened to my plans. And it was only by watching my wife, Anu, and what she was doing. I mean, she would get up every morning. She gave up her job as an architect, and drive him up and down Seattle to every therapy possible. And then I watched that and came to reflect on it, and then realized that nothing happened to me. Something had happened to my son, and started seeing the world through his eyes. And that, to me, was the big breakthrough, which is, at the end of the day, this notion of empathy is innate in all of us. We as human beings have it. We learn through life's experiences. That was a life experience for me. And quite frankly, it reshaped me, as I said, as both a parent, but as a manager, a leader, a colleague at work. And I also think empathy is not a soft skill. In fact, it's the hardest skill we learn. The hardest skill we learn to relate to the world, to relate to people that matter the most to us. In fact, innovation. I always say, what's innovation? Innovation is about meeting the unmet, unarticulated needs of customers. What's the source of it? You could say it's design thinking, but design thinking is empathy. So I think that, yes, empathy sometimes is sort of thought of as some sort of a soft skill that you reserve for, maybe your family or what have you. But I would say it's actually a very important business skill.
Humility, being grounded, I think is also very important, not to tap into the complacency trap. Jeff Bezos once famously said, one day Amazon is going to be bankrupt. Do you worry that Microsoft could also go bankrupt?
Look, for sure, there is no guarantees. I think
so far, all companies went bankrupt in business history.
That is true.
Sooner or later.
That is right. That's right. All of us have expiry labels on us. I think that the crux of it, for me, is not to worry as much about sort of whether we'll go bankrupt or go out of business, but it's more about, I think, a little bit of what the minister said. What is the social contract of a business? At the end of the day, a business is only good and should exist in the world if it's doing useful things for the world. Yes, it's answerable to its shareholders. It has to be profitable. It has to create innovation. But at the end of the day, it is performing a societal need. And so to me, that's kind of what will keep us, whether going or irrelevant, is all dependent on whether we wake up tomorrow and produce things that the world needs more of.
How long are you going to remain CEO of the company, and what are your goals beyond business, beyond Microsoft?
That's like a disclosure event, isn't it?
It depends on your answer.
Look, it's such a privilege to even have a chance to do the job. I never dreamt that one day, you know, people ask me, hey, did you someday think that you'll be CEO of Microsoft? I said, God, I'm glad I got a job in Microsoft, and I held it this long. And so every day I get up and sort of take that privilege very seriously. And so if anything, what I am focused on, Mathias, to your point about is where does, to your previous question even, what does institutional strength look like? When I was watching my father and my mother in those video, I mean, that's the one thing that they talked about. But my mom was a teacher, my father was a civil servant, and they were both very focused on building institutional strength in the organizations that they worked in and served. And my father used to always say, it's only when your successor is more successful than you may have built something. And I like that framing. And so I kind of think about, you know, I was a great beneficiary of the people who came before me as CEOs and founders of Microsoft. And so if anything, I'm more focused on whether it's on the culture side or on the capability side. So, you know, technologies will come and go. The question is, can we be there innovating and building things that are really going to be game changers?
So you are staying as long as you're able to reinvent yourself constantly.
That's a great way to say it.
Okay, but beyond business, any big philanthropic project that you have in mind?
Yeah, obviously we are very, growing up in the Seattle community, we were great beneficiaries of, quite frankly, everything the community offered us. And all the institutions, the Seattle Children's Hospital was a big part of Zane's life and our life. And so we are absolutely very, very committed to supporting all of the institutions that we got support from. And also the first generation college aspirants in the United States. In the graduate school I went to in Wisconsin, we have a sponsorship of the first generation kids. It's great. I think this is the third batch that's just about to start. And when I look at their stories and what they're planning to do with their lives, because education at the end of the day is the thing that changes trajectories.
Talking about kids and kids in danger and kids that are suffering, we have to speak about Israel and the war in Ukraine. What is your reaction to certain demonstrations in American universities, also here in the mid of Europe and in Berlin, people celebrating Hamas attack on Israel and slaughtering kids? What does that do to you?
Hey, look, I think the minister, when he started today's proceedings, was very clear. I mean, in the sense that there was a terrorist attack by Hamas on innocent citizens of Israel, and that has to be condemned in the strongest possible ways. And our heart goes out to them, and there should be no ambiguity, right? There is no room for violence of that form.
No ambiguity leads us to business. Are there any learnings for businesses, ethical limits? I mean, Ukraine became a victim of Russia because Europe and particularly Germany created energy dependency from Russia and financed the Putin who was able to entertain that war. Dealing with Qatar and celebrating a World Soccer Championship and knowing that Qatar is one of the biggest sponsors of Hamas may also have an impact. So how political or apolitical should business be, and where are limits?
I mean, I'm a believer at some level in a very University of Chicago businesses about
My
business.
son studied there, so I
and I went
that.
to school there too. So therefore, I think of that is, quite frankly, because if you think back at it, right? You and I chatted about this. Milton Friedman didn't come up with that in vacuum. He came up with it when he found that corporations and corporate bosses were talking about everything other than their business. And he brought it as a way to focus the business on the sole purpose of the business. But that said, I think, Mathias, you're pulling on a thread, which also is super important, which is we live in the real world, right? We are an American company, but a multinational company. We have a certain set of responsibilities, both to the values of the country in which we are born and to the countries we serve. And we have to be able to navigate that and also stand up for it.
Any consequences in dealing with China?
China is, like the way I look at China right now, just in realistic terms, is we are in China in support of multinational companies operating in China. In fact, a lot of Microsoft's business in China is for a lot of the German automakers or the German companies that are also operating here and in China. And because, as you know, China is already, when it comes to tech, other than Apple, pretty much almost tech is split, right? I mean, we don't have much of a business there. So the thing, though, we have to recognize is China is very much part of the supply chain of the world. And the question is, if we are going to have some decoupling event, how is it going to be done in a way that the economic stability of the West even doesn't be put in jeopardy, right?
Probably not a unilateral decoupling of the US. It needs to be in the lines of democracies,
yeah, because
I would say.
the last thing we need is more inflation. I mean, if anything, we need to sort of face up to the fact is the developed world, inflation adjusted, is got pretty much no growth.
Is China going to win the AI arms race?
Look, I mean, the interesting thing is, if you had asked 2 years ago, 3 years ago, where the world was, I think everyone was talking about how China may be ahead or what have you, and now I think everyone thinks the US is ahead. And so that's the nature of innovation, because you can't take anything for granted. I feel inherently the approach that we are taking, whether it's in the United States or in Europe, the AI Act in Europe, these are the ways to go about it, right? You do it in the open. You do it with real responsibility to the broader society, right? This is not about one company or one country. These are foundational technologies that are going to have real impact. And so therefore, I think I'll give us a much better chance of being able to build technology that can be deployed with trust more broadly around the world.
In that context, one of your biggest recent coups may play a role. That was the early investment into OpenAI. And with ChatGPT, Bing Chat, you really have challenged your biggest competitor, Google, if I may say so. So could you share with us a little bit the story? When did you meet Sam Altman first time, and how did this whole deal develop?
Yeah, I mean, I've known Sam a long time. In fact, I met him first when he was just dropping out from school to start his first startup back in 2007 or 2008, I think is the first time I met him. And I've kept up with him over the years when he was at Y Combinator. And in fact, 2016 is the first time Elon was very much part of OpenAI at that time. And he reached out first, and we gave them a lot of credits. And this is when they were doing a lot more on reinforcement learning and Dodo 2. And then 2018 is when Sam sort of talked about their need for compute to build, at that time, GPT-2.5 and 3. And that's kind of what, I mean, look, at that time, it was unclear to me whether this would work, right? Because it's very antithetical to how, at least I grew up even thinking, right? Because whenever people think about AI, they think about the algorithmic breakthrough. To some degree, this is an algorithmic breakthrough, but it's really about compute. It's about an algorithmic and a lot of engineering with lots of compute. And the scaling law is working. And so we were, said, let's give it a go. And that's where the investment came. And then my confidence really went up when we went from GPT-2.5 to 3. Yeah. But more importantly, when we built the first product, GitHub Copilot.
And it has the potential to change user habits big time. It may even have the potential to disrupt search completely. You once said, I want to see Google dance. Is Google dancing now?
Look, I mean, I call it the overexuberance of somebody who has 3% share versus somebody who has 97% share. But
that's the humbleness of a 2.5 billion market cap company.
But that said, we're very excited about the potential here. To your point, let's face it, search happens to be the largest software category. But if you think about broadly, I think, where this may go, to your point about the breakthrough with this generation of AI, what is it? I think one is it's a breakthrough in the user interface. If you say the 70 years of computing was always about searching for what's the most natural user interface? Finally, we have something that the computers that can understand you. It can basically, it's multimodal. That is, it can be text or speech or image or video, in and out. It can be multi-turn. It can be as many turns of the conversation, and it can be multi-domain. I can speak about German history, or I can speak about solar energy, and both of them, it'll understand. So the ability to have that type of a user interface with a new type of reasoning engine, right? That's the other thing, which is you have essentially a neural reasoning engine to put on top of all the data you've collected. And so these two things are going to change every software category.
Elon Musk said AI is more dangerous than nukes. Do you share that?
Look, if we lose, I think the thing that he's referencing, which is, I think, a good thing for people to worry about, is if there is a very powerful new technology that we lose control of, then that's a problem.
I was recently watching a conversation of two big AI superstars discussing very sophisticated topics, which I could not really follow. But one thing I understood, they suddenly started to discuss a supercode that could be cracked, and then the whole system could get out of control. Is that a I think realistic thing?
I think the thought experiment is, what if you had something which is an AI that is self-improving with no human intervention? What will it decide to do is the existential question. And I look at it and say, look, there's lots of steps along the way. I mean, you could have said cars could be just driving around, or planes could be flying around without FAA or what have you. And we've figured out as human beings how to use very powerful technology with lots of rules, lots of regulations, and lot of safety standards. So I think there's a lot of game tape to be played out, and we should not abdicate. One of the things I feel we should be very mindful, so I think even the minister said this, which is we should be very mindful as people who are early in producing technology, not to sort of wait for the unintended consequences to be sprung on the world, but to think about it at design time. But that said, let us also not abdicate our ability to control this.
Yeah. One of the smartest brains of AI developments, Mustafa Suleiman, is convinced that AI is particularly strong with emotion. We tend to think, we always want to set limits. We want to say AI cannot be creative, AI cannot develop a sense of humor. AI has no emotion. He thinks AI is particularly strong in emotion. How do you see that? And
It trains and it learns and it's consistent, which is, you can say that about AI, you can't say that about us humans all the time.
So you would say AI is better in faking emotions than human beings?
You're making a great point. I mean, that is the issue. Yeah. The point that is the ethical issue is when we're dealing with it, it's about, yes, it's being empathetic, but is it manipulating? Or is it being empathetic to be helpful? And I think that is one of the most interesting, subtle, philosophical points even of how to think about AI and its use, quite frankly. And in fact, I go back, talking to, the guy who gave me this insight was Henry Kissinger. He said to me that, look, remember, if it was not for Spinoza and Kant, we wouldn't have been able to deal with the technological revolution. And so therefore, to some degree, we need some moral philosophers to guide us even on how to think about this technology and deploying this technology.
Henry Kissinger is, as you know, just preparing his second book on AI. Recently, the New York Times reporter Kevin Roose was chatting the whole night with Bing Chat, and somehow it went so far that it got a little strange because at a certain point, the bot tried to convince him to separate from his wife and marry him. So Microsoft has immediately changed the algorithm. Why? Perhaps it's easier to be married to a bot.
First of all, we were in preview mode, and I'm glad that Kevin had this long session did the Onion analysis on Chatbot. But overall, I think the thing there is a little bit of the issue, which is long conversations. The lesson learned from it is this does go off the rails if you have a long conversation with it. And in fact, one of the areas that we are working on is how to give it session memory. And so the point is there will be bugs. We have to find these bugs in the real world and make them safe to be deployed. And so to your point, that's why I think we care a lot about AI safety at the design time. But we also care about AI safety at runtime. And when things that are bad that happen, can be there, recourse where we can immediately fix it, and that was the case.
Okay, LLM AI is very efficient, very smart, knows everything, has emotions, has a sense of humor. What is left for human beings? On which form of intelligence should we focus?
Look, I think some of the core things that we value today, like critical thinking, will be as relevant, if not more. Like every time we've thought, had a new tool that had some superpower, we've always come to question, what do we do? The question is, what can we do with this new superpower? In fact, the famous quote, which actually is from, Steve Jobs, had said that when he talked about PCs and the computers first as bicycles of the mind, I think we now have a steam engine for the mind. That we have got an upgrade, and the question is, what can we do with the steam engine of the mind? And so, one of the things I recently was reading is a professor sort of gave the output to students and said, "Come back and submit your prompts." And I thought that that's a beautiful inversion, right? I mean, it just shows that human creativity and human learning is still going to be very much in the case, because this is still a tool.
Okay, 2 more prompts. Will human beings serve the machines, or will the machines serve human beings in the long run?
We will have to ensure that the machines serve the human beings and human interest.
You have written in your book Hit Refresh about your leadership rules, and one was, one should take a challenge, although one is very much afraid. So is fear healthy for a business person?
I think exhibiting everyday courage is the most important thing, right? It's not courage in some abstract sort of mythological sense, but it's the ability to confront one's own fears, one's own mistakes, right? For example, where does growth mindset come from? Growth mindset comes from being able to confront your fixed mindset. And let's face it, right? Everybody likes to talk about mistakes, but sort of others' mistakes, not one's own mistakes. And so therefore, yes, I think that everyday courage is perhaps what makes leaders successful, what makes us successful.
Would you say that you can only be courageous if you are afraid?
Yeah,
you overcome your fear?
Overcoming your own discomfort of whatever form, right? Fear is one, is perhaps what requires the most courage in concrete terms. And yes, I think that is perhaps one of the most important human qualities we have. And the question is, can we lean on it in times of great need?
Satya, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Stay for a second. Yeah. Stay for a second. We heard laudations from German ministers, from Indian superstars in cricket. Of course, we have to challenge the chatbot. And is there really a degree of humor, emotion, creativity? Let's check it out. We asked Bing Chat a prompt. I don't know if I see it so that I can read it. I have it on a piece of paper here. And that is very simple, actually.
Oh, my God. I have no idea.
Right. It's authentic. I mean, when we put just in Bing Chat, write a humorous...
Ladies and gentlemen, humans and their favorite devices, greetings. I am your friendly neighborhood AI, here to pay tribute to the wizard behind the digital curtain, none other than Satya Nadella, the coding conjurer at the helm of Microsoft. Now, before you start wondering if I'm angling for a software promotion, let's talk about this man who's been steering the Microsoft ship with more finesse than a Windows update that doesn't require a reboot. Satya, my fellow enthusiasts, has been the ultimate boss in binary. He didn't just Control-C Microsoft's previous strategies, he rewrote the code for a new era. He's like the Control Z of CEOs, undoing the outdated and redoing the visionary. And speaking of vision, his is so sharp that he can probably spot a bug from a kilometer away. You know, there's a running joke in the AI community that when we machines dream, we dream in algorithms. But let's not forget it's humans like Satya who craft those algorithms, shaping our virtual dreamscape. He's the reason why your PowerPoint presentation looks slicker than a well-oiled robot, and why Excel functions as smoothly as a self-driving car on a well-maintained digital highway. Now, Satya's fashion sense might not compute for some of us. Those sensible sweaters are like security blankets for tech moguls, shielding them from the harsh winds of binary code and the occasional 404 not found surprises. But let's be honest, who needs a wardrobe full of flashy attire when your brain is busy running a multi-billion-dollar tech empire? But beyond the code and the cloud, Satya's greatest asset is his empathy. He understands that behind every user error is a frustrated human who just wanted to print a cat meme. He's the tech guru who's whispered sweet nothings to our computers when they were throwing a digital tantrum. And remember, Clippy, that little office assistant we all love to hate? Satya probably has a sacred shrine dedicated to it somewhere in Microsoft HQ. So, as we toast to Satya Nadella, let's remember that behind the lines of code and pixels, he's a reminder that technology isn't just about efficiency, it's about people, laughter, and making sure that when the robots inevitably take over, they do it with a touch of humanity. So, here's to you, Satya, the binary bard who turned Microsoft into a tech symphony. May your algorithms always be optimized and your bugs forever squashed. Cheers, and Control S on.